start right here around this period right here, and we're going to finish up this period, and then next week we'll jump back over and pick up with Judah. So I hope that map it's a good representation, and you can see where we are. Okay, and now, so this is where we kind of left it. We went through these last week, but we'll go over it really quick. Jehu became the 10th king, 841. Jehoahaz became the 11th king, reigned 17 years. Wasn't a bad king. Jehoahaz wasn't a bad king as you go in Israel. Then we got to Jehoash, and he wasn't really a bad king either, if you're going to rank him. Jehoash actually went to Elisha, and he went to appeal to Elisha to see if he can gain favor with the Lord. And Elisha told him that they would defeat the Syrians. He was fighting the Syrians at the time, and told him to take his arrows and strike the ground, and God would give him victory. And he struck the ground 3 times, and Elisha said, 3 times? You know, when you strike it like multiple times, and God would have given you complete victory, but since you only struck it 3 times, God's going to let you win 3 battles, and that was it. And so because of his kind of lack of faith there, Jehoash was not able to defeat the Syrians totally. And then we get into Jeroboam. That's where we are now. We jumped over to Jeroboam. And now we're in Jeroboam 2. And he was a very successful king of Israel, if you will. And he recovered some of the land that had been lost earlier, some of the land east of Jordan, and some of the land north of Israel into Syria. He recovered all those lands and kind of built Israel back up a little bit. And Syria was fighting Assyria at the time. And coffee. Don't everybody rush back and get coffee. Now, it's interesting here, during the reign of Jeroboam, it was prophesied that he would expand the kingdom by none other than Jonah. Have you ever heard of Jonah? Do I need to give you a background on Jonah? And everybody's shaking their head. No, please. But we see that Jonah was a prophet during this time. We're going to see Jonah's name a little bit later. And the prophets Amos and Hosea also prophesied to Jeroboam and told him about the destruction that was going to come upon Jerusalem if they didn't change their ways. And they talked about in these 2 prophets. If you go back and read these prophets, they give you a better detail of the condition of Israel at that time than you'll get from either Kings or Chronicles. And they said that the prevalence of idolatry and the decadence, the drunkenness, the oppression, and they give you a really good picture of just how bad Israel was at this time. And Amos prophesied about all the surrounding nations were going to come in and destroy Jeroboam and his house. That happened. And he told also about the fact that they were going to be taken into captivity, and that happened. So very, very interesting if you want to see where these 2 prophets fit in here with the reign of Jeroboam II. Now, after Jeroboam II, his son Zechariah became the 14th king, and I only have 2 lines on Zechariah because that's it. I mean, you look in the Bible, there's about 2 lines in the Bible on Zechariah. There's nothing you can say about him other than he was just as bad as all the other kings before him. He was an evil person, and he eventually was killed in a civil war by Shallum. So what can you say about Zechariah? You can say almost even less about Shallum. So there was a big civil war going on. Shallum killed Zechariah, and became king, and he reigned all of 1 month. That was, you remember early on, we talked early Israel, we talked about Omri and Zimri and all that civil war that was going on, and how those kings were just killing each other one after. We're repeating it. Now here we are, 100 and some years later, we're repeating the same cycle. Civil war, people dying, people lasting 1 month, and that's it. So there's not a whole lot you can say about Shallum. He was killed by Menahem, the 16th king. And the civil war was continuing, so in fact you had 2 reigns going on. You had, Menahem was the official king, and he reigned in Samaria, which was the capital of Israel. But you had this guy by the name of Pekah, who was leading the civil war, and he claimed to be the king, and he ruled up in the northern part of Israel and made his headquarters up in Gilead, and he claimed to be king too. So we had both of these kings going on at one time. Now, Menahem was a very cruel and very violent king, and he oppressed his people, and he got in trouble with Assyria. And Assyria came in to northern Israel for the very first time. And Menahem was afraid, as he well should be, and he started paying Assyria, the king Tiglath-Pileser, he started paying him tribute. He was taking money from wealthy Israelites and paying tribute to Assyria. Now, this is a good time to let's go into a little more detail about Assyria. We have talked about them, we've mentioned them, but we haven't gone into a lot of detail about them. So we're going to go into a little more detail about Assyria. Now, they were Semitic origin, which means they came from who? The son Shem. The 3 sons, and they came from the son. They trace their line after the flood to Shem. That's the same line that David comes from, that Jesus comes from Shem. Now, originally it was just a small tract. Now look at this. You can't see this very well, I understand. But that is old Syria. You can see, if you could see from this says the Middle Assyrian Empire, 1365 to 1000 BC. So this is old Syria. And here is in the dark blue here is the original Assyria. Now you can see how the colors, how they started getting bigger by 1000 BC. Now, in case you didn't know, that is Nineveh. That is the city of Nineveh. We learned this morning, it says it's a great city. The walls around Nineveh were only like a 6-8 mile circumference. So the city of Nineveh itself wasn't very big, but the area, that whole area, it's kind of like metropolitan Nashville, and the whole area was about maybe 60 miles across in Nineveh and its city limits. So this is where our boy Jonah went. You want me to talk about Jonah some more? Yeah. So this is where Jonah went. And this is old Syria. We're going to see a little bit more about new Syria here in a minute. Now, as you saw on the map how they spread out to the Mediterranean Sea, that was under Tiglath-Pileser. And an interesting thing about that is as he was expanding his kingdom, he was fighting an Aramean king by the name of Zobath, and they were having a kind of a stalemate. And David goes up. This is in the reign of David. He goes up and defeats Zobath and takes back some of northern Israel. And what this frees is Assyria that just keep on pushing west to the Mediterranean Sea. So during the 10th century, we just saw Assyria began to rise and became a dominant world power. And here's some of the kings, and I can pronounce them, but I won't. But The interesting ones to note, Shalmaneser III. Shalmaneser III was the king of Assyria when Ahab was the king of Israel. And at that point in time, Syria was pretty powerful. Syria pushed back Assyria, pushed them back out of the, Syria sitting right on top of northern Israel and was able to push them back, and it helped Syria and it helped Israel at the time under Shalmaneser. But I told you, she does. And they should have named this some other name. King Jehu paid tribute to Shalmaneser III. So we talked about Jehu earlier. Now, this is interesting. I think this is very interesting. This is a black obelisk. It's just a slab of Shalmaneser III. This was discovered in 1846. It was uncovered in 1846 in the city of Nimrud, which is present-day Iraq. In the Bible, Nimrud is called Kala. It's mentioned in the Bible. It's called Kala, and this obelisk is actually in the British Museum. And we've been in the British Museum. Did we see this? I don't remember. Too much to see. But it's very interesting. Now, there are writings, we'll back up. There are writings on this that said, where did I go? There are writings on this that mentions Jehu of Israel. And some scholars think that these are kings who are paying tribute to Shalmaneser. And some scholars think one of these kings is Jehu. How do they get that? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't mention their name. But in the writings, it does mention that Jehu. So here we have real archaeological evidence that backs up the claims in the Bible. I think this is quite interesting. Now, here's some more kings that came through. And then we see that Adad-Nirari III collected tribute from Tyre, Sidon, Israel, Philistia, and Damascus, and defeated Damascus at that time. And interesting also that he was fighting Syria because Syria was fighting Israel at the time. Everybody was always fighting during those times. And Syria was fighting Israel at the time, and then when Assyria came in and defeated Syria, it relieved Israel. And in 2 Kings 13:5, it said God sent a Savior to help Israel push back Syria. And that Savior was Assyria, believe it or not. And Jehoahaz paid tribute to him as well. Now we get into his son Shalmaneser IV, and he was very weak. And he was the king during the reign of Jeroboam II. And furthermore, he was the king of Israel when Jonah went to Nineveh. So what we just heard a few minutes later, when Jonah was in preaching with Nineveh, Shalmaneser IV was the king. Now, I thought Ryan did a really good job. God spared Nineveh. God was very, very angry with Assyria, and he spared Israel because he said he had, 120,000, and I don't know if that's 120,000 men, 120,000 children. He says the way it's worded in the Bible. But Nineveh never repented and turned its ways to God totally. To them, God, and then Ryan pointed it out, to them, our God was just another God. And so they started worshiping our God just like he was another God and hoped that he would get some relief. And God spared them. He spared them. But they never totally, and obviously Assyria never totally turned to our God. A couple of other weak kings came in, and then this guy came in, and we just mentioned him just a little bit earlier. Tiglath-Pileser, 744, 727. In the Bible, 2 Kings 15, he's called Pul, a real man, mentioned in the Bible, backs that up. Now, here's the thing about this guy. This guy was ruthless. He had unlimited ambition. He had unlimited power. He built this great army, and his goal was to get beyond that little blue circle I showed you earlier. His goal was to take over the world. And he started it, and he was doing a really good job. He conquered Damascus. He actually, during his reign, we actually see both Israel and Judah paying him some money. So he was an extraordinary, powerful king that brought Assyria. We're going to see a little bit more about him in just a moment. So he thought of a world empire and built a great, great army. Now, during this time of Tiglath-Pileser, back to Israel, we saw Menahem paying Tiglath-Pileser tribute, and then after him, we see Pekahiah became the king, 17th king. And he remained in Syria while Pekah reigned in Gilead. So remember, we had Menahem here, Pekah here. Menahem dies, Pekahiah takes over, and we still got this dual kingship going in Israel until Pekah kills Pekahiah. So when he did that, he consolidated Israel again back into one nation. Now, he became the sole king of Israel. He joined with Rezin to fight Assyria. This is an interesting story because Menahem was paying tribute to Assyria. And Pekah did not like that. So he and the king of Syria got together and they said, we're going to fight Assyria. And we want Judah to help. So they go down to Ahaz, who we talked about last week. They go down to Ahaz and say, we want you to join us and fight in Assyria. And Ahaz said, I'm not going to do it. So they said, okay, we're going to fight you.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
So they start trying to defeat Ahaz and put their own puppet king over Judah, and so they can then take on Assyria. So what does Ahaz do? Ahaz aligns himself with Assyria. In order to defeat these two guys, he agrees to give Assyria money and gets in with Assyria. Now, I put Isaiah. You see Isaiah, right? I didn't have much room for it, but you can go to the book of Isaiah, and you can see Isaiah is warning King Ahaz, do not align yourself with Assyria. You're making a horrible mistake. Don't do it. But he does it. And because he said it's going to be horrible for us one day. So Tiglath-Pileser III comes into northern Israel and takes over northern Israel. He defeats Pekah and defeats, as I said earlier, he defeats the king of Syria, Rezin, kills him. And this is the first deportation. He takes many Israelites back to Assyria, and we're going to see that in a little bit. And then Pekah reigned 2 years and was killed by Hosea. So Hosea continued to pay tribute to Assyria. Tiglath-Pileser dies.
Calling emergency services on speaker.
I'm going to turn her off. And he dies, and Shalmaneser the fifth takes over as the king. So Hosea decides, since Tiglath-Pileser dies, I'm not going to pay them any more tribute. And since and then he said, I'm going to get Egypt to help me fight them. Now, Egypt has gotten pretty powerful at this time, but God had warned the people, Israelites, do not ever get in league with Egypt. And Hosea decides that he's going to break his alliance with Assyria, quit paying them money, and then he's going to link up with Egypt, and they're going to conquer Assyria. This is bad news. This is not going to happen. So Shalmaneser comes in to Israel, and guess what? The cavalry doesn't come. Egypt never comes, and Shalmaneser defeated Israel. It was a 3-year siege. A 3-year siege upon Israel. And then finally, in 722, they conquer Israel. They take Hosea as a prisoner. And then they take control of Samaria. And then they begin more deportations. Now, I know this is a really good map. I wish you could see it. This is Neo-Assyrian Empire. Neo just means new. What we saw earlier, historians call that the original Assyria, Old Assyria, and they call this one starting about 920, they call this the New Assyrian Empire. Earlier we were talking about this, and we saw Tiglath-Pileser, and down here he's got all these legends where Tiglath-Pileser, he extended it a little bit more, and then under Sargon, we'll see it got extended a little bit more, and then look, eventually Assyria had all of this, and later they're even going to pick up this. So you see, here's where Israel, this pink, it comes in under Shalmaneser, and they're also going toward the Mediterranean Sea here. They're going east here. So they have become now the dominant world empire. Very, very powerful here. Here's another map that kind of gives you a little bit more. This is the original. You see Nineveh there. This is the original Assyria. I talked about old Assyria. And now look, eventually they get all of this. And look how big they have become. So they really became. Now, we talked about Tiglath-Pileser. He began a practice of cross deportation. Now, I think Roger talked about this a couple weeks ago. It used to be when a country defeated another country, all they did was make them pay them money. Just give us monthly, annually, whatever. Just give us a lot of money, and you'll be under us, but we'll kind of leave you alone. He didn't believe in that. He believes that the way you defeat a country is you start mixing up their populations. And that's what continued. So after Shalmaneser died, during the siege of Israel, 725, 722, Shalmaneser died, and Sargon took over, and I think we saw him on the other page. And he deported 27,000 more Israelites. They took people to Assyria, or lands that Assyria owned, and they brought people in those lands back into northern Israel. Samaria, the capital city was Samaria, so that land took over the whole name Samaria. And under the next 3 Assyrian kings, this swap deportation continued. Now this is a good map too. I'm sorry you can't see these maps. So if you see in the blue, this is the first deportation by Tiglath-Pileser. He took people out of northern Israel, Samaria, even Damascus. He took them into these areas of Assyria. Then under Shalmaneser, the fifth, the one who actually defeated Israel, and Sargon, they took more, put them over here. And here Sargon even took some of the Israelites out of here and moved them even further here. Here's another map, shows you. So here's where Assyria takes the blue, takes Israel into their area here. But what's important is look at the orange, and we'll get the green later because that's Judah. But look at the orange. They take people from these areas that they've conquered and move them back into Israel, to Samaria. So what does this mean? This means that the whole element of Israel has changed. See, he believed, Tiglath-Pileser believed, that if you can cross deportation, see, they don't have anything in common anymore. You don't have anything in common with your neighbor. You don't worship the same gods. You don't dress the same. You have nothing in common. So in Israel, that's going on. Over here in Assyria, that's going on. So you got Israelites spread out, and they're mingled in with all these Gentiles that have been captured and brought in. And just all of a sudden, you lose your identity. And it makes it easy. It makes it easier to control a country when you get a country in this shape. And we know, well, let's talk about this. A lot of bad things started happening in Israel. So Assyria sent a priest back to teach the Gentiles, or the people they brought into Syria, teach them the ways of Jehovah. And thought, if these people go in here and if they start worshiping God, then maybe all these disastrous things will quit happening to people. So they brought this priest back to do that. But as you notice here, I say that the Israelites and the ones in Samaria and the ones in Assyria, they soon lost their identity. So you know, when we get to Jesus' time, why the Jews and the Samaritans were such brutal enemies. Because the Samaritans, the Jews viewed Samaria and Samaritans, they were half-breeds. Their worship was a half-breed worship, even though some of them did worship God, and they set up places in Samaria where you could actually go and worship God. There was also Asherah poles. There was also Baal worship going on at the same time. And so there were good people in Samaria, good Jewish people in Samaria, but it was such a mingled lot that the Jews just really, really disliked the Samaritan. That's why when Jesus gives a parable like the Good Samaritan, that's a shocking parable to the Jews. I mean, a Samaritan stopped for a Jew, I guarantee you, a Jew will not stop for a Samaritan. So that's a shocking parable. And when you look at Jesus in John 4, when he goes to the well in Samaria and gets the water, it's a great story. If you know the background now, you know why that is such a great story. So we see then that it has totally changed. So the kingdom of Israel disappeared from the nations of the world. Just like that. No more Israel. In 1947, the United Nations said there should be two states in Palestine, an Israeli state and a Palestine state. The Jews did not like that. And the Jews declared all of Palestine in 1948 the nation of Israel. So it's not a kingdom that God created. It's a state that man created. The state, the country of Israel that we have today. Not the same thing that God intended back in those days. And as we know, on May 14th, 1948, Israel declared itself a state. On May 15th, the Arabs attacked them. the very next day, and they have been fighting for 77 years over in that country, and they're still fighting. So that's where we end with Israel. We're ending a little bit early. We're going to end with Israel. So next week, Roger is going to be back, and he's going to pick up with Hezekiah and Judah, and we're going to see around 700 there. We're going to see Israel's gone. We've got Judah still existing down here, and we're going to look at these kings, and we see the fate of Judah. Any comments? Any questions? Next Sunday, there's going to be that Lawsome luncheon in here, so we'll be back in the auditorium. So remember, next Sunday, if you come in here and you see nobody in here, go to the auditorium. That's where we'll be, auditorium. Okay? All right, since I got a little time here, I'm going to tell you about one more king and one more queen, okay? One more king and one more queen. Lipscomb Homecoming Corps. And in case you don't know, that young man right there is our grandson. And he's even got a crown on. Look here. He's got a crown on. I'm not bowing down to him. I bet you that. We're awful proud of our grandson for being elected homecoming queen. Anything else? Go to lunch early. Thank you very much. We appreciate your attendance. You're a sneak.